Hello everybody. I just finished going through the Kigali Genocide Memorial. In 1994, there was a horrendous genocide, a massacre of epic proportions in Rwanda. The mainly Hutu majority slaughtered more than 800,000 of their mainly Tutsi countrymen. These are some of the scenes that are played again and again to this day from those 100 days, when the name Rwanda eventually became synonymous with the word genocide. Since that episode in 1992, the country has been on a long journey of recovery, of punishing the crimes from that period, but also, perhaps more importantly, painfully forgiving each other, reconciling millions of people with each other, even those who may have killed members of each other's families. The wound is deep. The recovery is still ongoing. The Kigali Genocide Memorial is part of that healing process. The memorial is part oral history that captures the experiences of real people during and after the genocide. It is also part educational. Genocides don't happen overnight. All of us will do well to visit this memorial to understand how hatred is planted like a seed in the case of the Rwandan experience from its colonial days, then nurtured, then institutionalized until it is expressed in an explosive way. The memorial, perhaps most important of all, is the mass grave of more than 250,000 people who are buried right here. And more are still being added as their bodies are found somewhere in the country. I wanted to spend a few minutes reflecting on how visiting this particular memorial, the effect that it had on me, the thoughts that it conjured in my mind, and I want to have it recorded in this video for myself and for all my friends. The first thing that struck me was that this massacre, this genocide, wasn't simply a senseless battle between two warring tribes from ancient times. It really wasn't. If you visit this memorial, you will be taught and you will see how racism, bigotry, hatred is a systematic modern day phenomenon. The story is told in this memorial of how the Germans who first colonized Rwanda started by documenting and dividing and ruling the Hutus and the Tutsis and other minorities in this country, even laying scientific claim to the fact that they were probably genetically different at a time when there was no genetic evidence to that. And then after World War I, when the Belgians took over the country, supposedly administering it on behalf of the League of Nations, formalized the structures of racism, which then got carried over into the political structure of the country. And so the ideas of hatred were carried in the politics, in the education, in the social fiber of the country for many years, from the beginning of the previous century right up to 1994, when the massacre took place. So it was something that was systematically built in a structured modern country over a period of time. I remember being very upset during the episode of the Tiananmen incident in China and how upset I was. Then I asked myself, why was it that I was not upset when in 1994, many years later, the Rwandan genocide took place? Well, the first reason was because I knew very little about Africa at that time and very little about Rwanda and how developed and economy it already was at that time. Developed as in it was still a poor country, but it was a modern poor country. And how the hatred between the Tutsis and the Hutus was actually enshrined in the political system already at that time. For that reason, this genocide, the Rwandan genocide, should touch all of us in modern society. It is not something from a backward continent that most of us have moved on and so on. The second thing that struck me was that when I started reflecting on all instances of, very benign dislike and hatred in the societies that I encounter, and it can be something as innocent as fundamentalist Christians singing songs like, my God will kill my enemy and so on, or the fundamentalist Muslims saying, jihad, or in India today you have this incredible resurgence of Hindu nationalism saying that India belongs to the Hindus and we have to rewrite the story of the times when India was ruled by the Muslims and so on. Or even in the country that I was born, Malaysia, where I hear about young Malay kids being taught by their teachers in school and by their muftis or their ulamas in religious school that their Chinese or Indian friends are infidels, that their Chinese friends eat pigs and therefore they're not clean. Orang Melayu, when you are taught these things and you want to know what the logical conclusion of such thoughts are, please come to the Rwandan Genocide Museum and visit the graves of 250,000 people who will tell you what the logical conclusion of such thinking is. This is where it ends. And after it ends, assuming that in some Christian society somewhere, some Muslim society somewhere, some nationalistic government that has gone racist somewhere, after the genocides in those countries, when you come to this museum or rather this memorial and go to the museum part and recreate the stories of hatred and the consequence of hatred, you suddenly realize that the actual problem was never race. The actual problem might have been economic, might have been geographic, but it was never race. It's amazing. If you are a Hutu or a Tutsi coming to this memorial today and looking at how the story has been recreated and thinking about the hatred that you had in the 1980s and 70s and 60s and 50s, how illogical racism would look like and feel after you've killed 250,000 people for what you think is a logical extension of your biases. My Malay friends in Malaysia will say, no, we are not that sort of people. You are making us sound like racists. You are making us look evil. You are tarring us. By you're making us. It's a defamation of our culture and so on. And you know what? Come to this museum, visit the history part of it, and see how in the 1950s and 60s, that's exactly how people who thought that they were right were thinking at that time. And that there was nothing wrong with petty biases. Itu orang Melayu, bukan? Itu orang Cina, makan babi lah, tak boleh dengan bersama dengan dia. It sounds very innocent, but you take it to its logical conclusion, this is what it ends up as. You know, my Singapore friends are not out of the woods on this one either. I've been to Auschwitz in Poland, and here now in Kigali. And in both political systems, that's the language that they use. They use the same language. In Germany, they use the language of the Jewish problem. Here, they use the phrase the Tutsi problem. In Singapore today, we say the Seka problem, the immigrant Indians who are taking away our jobs. See the similarities? Oh man! You know something, funny thing about jobs is this, that jobs are taken, not given. In other words, you don't sit to be given a job. You go out and apply and you take a job or you leave a job. But somehow, when it comes to people who feel deprived or feel excluded, they always see the other side as a problem. You know, after the genocide is over and after there is reconciliation, and when you revisit the whole story, you realize the story was never ethnic. The other guy was never the problem. The problem may have been economic. The economic pie may have been shrinking. Like in Rwanda, the problem was that the price of coffee had plummeted, and the country was struggling, and the majority people had to look around for someone to blame, and the easiest people to blame were the population. There was only 13 to 15% of the population was Tutsis. And it was easy to blame them for the economic, inability to share the economic pie. And all these realities come, these realizations comes after the genocide. You know, I'm not suggesting there's going to be a genocide in Singapore. All I'm saying is that if you take your thoughts to the logical conclusion, this is where you will land up. And if this is where you want to land up, then it's a choice. You direct the history of your country to this conclusion. And after that, you will rewrite the history and say, oh, we made a mistake. And all the names of these people on this wall, they died in vain. I'm not trying to make a big deal out of the emotional aspect of visiting this memorial. I'm just trying to point out that the seeds of hatred, this is the conclusion. When my Hakka friends say, oh, you know, between between a snake and an Indian, which one will you kill? You know, oh man, when I come to this memorial, I shudder, because jokes like that leads to genocides like this. I am totally grateful that the people of Rwanda built this memorial, because this memorial and all the photographs in there and all the descriptions of what happened, the reconstruction of the story, I'm just totally overwhelmed by how different the story shows after the genocide is over. And if only we set the same story before the genocide, that our hatreds and our biases and our insecurities are based on some things that can be easily dealt with, then genocides like this need not happen. I'm not even saying that there will not be any more genocides because there are memorials like this. There was Auschwitz, And then there was this. And then in 1995, the Bosnian genocide. And even as I'm making this video right now, Russians are trying to exterminate Ukrainians. And then there will be something else in the future. And there will be some society somewhere in the world who will keep making these mistakes, these tragedies, destroying lives. But that society does not need to be yours or mine, as long as it's dependent on us to make that difference. I can't control the politics of countries, of regions, of the other person, but I can control the politics of me. And there's a point at which this stops, and it stops with me. You know, Rwanda today is an amazing city. I'm walking around the city. It is sometimes called the Singapore of Africa. And well, it's also called the Switzerland of Africa, because there are Rwandans who grew up in Switzerland. I talked to the CEO of Bank of Kigali, and she grew up in Switzerland. She's got a Swiss passport. She's Rwandan. She came back to become the CEO of the bank. And what a wonderful, progressive, mature country it is today. The leadership of this country healed the wounds over many, many years, and there's a victory story at the back of this genocide, of this wound, this deep wound in this country. And it is to their credit that they healed that wound and have become the modern country that they are today. I walk through the streets of Kigali, and I go for my meetings and so on, and I meet very well-educated Rwandans today. Please do not ever underestimate this country now, right? And this country is an amazingly successful country. Although its per capita GDP is very low, about $800 per capita, it's well on its way to growing that very, very quickly. And the government has corruption, pat down, as in locked in down, and all of the money that they make has gone into building wonderful infrastructure that I've seen as I travel through this country, right? It's a very different country today. But there's something that I also learned from visiting different countries. And when I asked this question in countries like Ghana and in Rwanda, why are you so successful today? And the answer I get is, because we have seen the alternative. Because we have seen the alternative. And then I go around and look at all other countries that are doing well today. I go to Indonesia, right? And look at how progressive it is today. It has a functioning democracy. It has change of power peacefully, and its GDP has increased dramatically. And why? Because in 1997, after the Asian economic crisis, where Indonesia suffered more than any other country in the world, because they have seen the alternative. And one thought that struck me when I was going through this memorial is that I wished that my Chinese friends would have created a memorial to the Cultural Revolution. Now, the Cultural Revolution wasn't a genocide, but it pretty well was close to being one, with children exposing their parents and so on. And today, China is an incredibly successful country. And it doesn't have a memorial to remember where they started from to become what they are today. And when you have a memorial like this, you actually institutionalize what you've learned together as a country so that it will never happen again. And you also become humble to know that the price of peace, the price of stability that you so painfully acquired at a huge price to yourself is a price that you'll never want to pay again. So you are not, you don't say you're Tutsi or...
Yeah, there is no discrimination from is a Tutsi or Hutu. No discrimination nowadays.
Okay.
In this time.
This time, right?
Yeah. There is no categorization of different
tribes or something like that.
Tribes. Yeah, like the tribes.
Yeah, understand.